All right. It is time. We are back. It is Killer Bees, episode 12, for the first time since July. Can you believe it?
Oh my God, that's pretty bad. Kind of fell off there. Doesn't seem like that long, but yeah, I guess so.
So, for those of you that do not remember who we are or anything, I'm Tommy Barbee, and I'm joined, as always, by Keelin Billue,
Hello. It's good to see
my
you.
favorite person in White Sox fandom. Good to see
No,
you too.
you're mine.
It's been a interesting last few weeks. We went from the cautious optimism of the White Sox season to the crushing defeat of the playoffs. And if you've been following along, you know that on South Side Sox we've been doing a lot of festivities around Soxivus, which I think might end up being an annual thing. We'll have to see how it goes. But in the spirit of the thing that White Sox fandom always likes to do, which is complain extensively about our
Love it.
team and the things that we do, it seemed like an apt time to air our grievances. So we aired our grievances and it felt good. And then we talked about the best of times in White Sox 2021 season, and that was nice. And now we're talking about the worst games of the 2021 season, and that has also been cathartic. But Keelan, the game that you picked out, I think, is a very interesting microcosm of the White Sox season. So I was hoping you could talk about it a little bit more.
Yes. So um I chose the game where we were playing the Twins and Yermín hit that home run. I mean, I don't even have to give any more details. Everybody probably knows,
The game where he got yelled at.
Yeah, the Yermín getting yelled at game for breaking an unwritten ball. Yeah. Yeah, so I chose that game because I do feel like, as you kind of mentioned, like there were a lot of hopes at the beginning of the season, and then Yermín was such a, even like, I feel like I was very engaged this whole season, and that seems like years ago. And just reading back on that time, he was such a huge figure. I mean, we went crazy for him, and he was crushing it. And
he had his own hamburger.
Yeah, and it was like now a blip on the radar, kind of. But at the time, we were like, "Oh my God," which is kind of sad, but in retrospect now. But it was a good time, and he started to slump, and I think those of us, I wanted to believe like he would come back, and in a way, I still do believe there's something there, but it's probably not going to be given a chance like he has been given now. But yeah, I was wanting good things for him. So, I don't know who wouldn't. He's on our team. But yeah, he swung on a 3-0 and he homered, and it was a bomb. And, the Sox were up over the Minnesota Twins already quite a bit. It was like 15-4. And so, yeah, I mean, Tony La Russa went, and the press conference shared that he was disappointed in Yermín and there'd be consequences, and that he apologized to the Twins. And, there were different, as you'll remember, there were different kind of opinions about it. And it became a bit of a divisive topic within White Sox fandom. And that was annoying because it really did get kind of like polar.
It got really ugly.
Yeah. And it was so weird. Like, yeah. So that was a really, we've had a lot of losses that were bummers, but that's such a weird example because it's like, we should be so happy we're kicking the Twins' ass, even though it wasn't that challenging this year. And, just how it was handled, and it made, I don't know how many people remember, but it was national news, maybe not like huge national news, but it was trending on Twitter. Yeah. My brother and I were texting about it, yeah, I mean, it was weird because people were already skeptical of La Russa, understandably. And then, when you have people in the clubhouse having differing opinions and being open to the press about it, it's not a good look no matter what. So yeah, and it seems like everything turned out okay for everyone except for Yermín. And, then not long after that, he was sent down, and then he had sort of something going on mentally, or who knows.
Yeah.
He posted some things on Instagram about retiring, and then he came back in just a short period.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah.
Yeah, it was a very weird period of time, and I think the two aspects that I remember the most were the kind of La Russa almost excusing ahead of time the Twins hitting the Sox
Yes.
hitters afterwards, and just how weird it was that he would publicly say that. I mean, it's one thing if you talk about that internally and it's like, okay, we're probably going to get hit tomorrow, whatever. But it I know that people are going to think that I'm reading too far into it, but to me, it kind of set a precedent when you look at how many times Jose Abreu got hit throughout the season,
Yeah.
where it's like once you start kind of permitting examples where it's like, oh yeah, it's okay if you hit us, we'll understand, and never really retaliate or do anything to kind of defend your guys, it turned into this weird slippery slope, and I was never a fan of it for that reason.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And I do remember that game the next day. It was very tense.
It
And
was, yeah.
And I mean, it was tense. And yeah, that's a good point. Like, and some of our guys I'm sure some of them would throw down, but some of them, like Abreu, I mean, he's not gonna, for the most part, like, he gets hit and he takes it. He doesn't go like fight or anything. So it's so interesting that we're talking about, oh yeah, you broke an unwritten rule, and now you're gonna have this
Now you get to face the
unwritten punishment.
consequences, right?
Yeah, but it's like, it's pretty lame if it's unwritten to be talking about it out loud, and like you said, almost permitting it in a way.
Yeah, I mean, and the other part of it was kind of that, where as a manager, your job is to at least public facing defend your guys no matter what. So what I expected out of La Russa was him to say, yeah, that's not what I would have done. I told him to take the pitch. He should have taken the pitch. We'll deal with it internally. Like, that's all you have to say. And then if you want to ream him out in the clubhouse, ream him out in the clubhouse. But the way that he went about it, and I remember how angry like CC Sabathia was, of all people, talking about it. And he really kind of went on the messaging that I was frustrated with, that for the team to communicate well with each other, they all have to be on the same page.
Yeah.
And there was so much disarray where Tony was saying one thing, Lance Lynn was saying something else, Adam Eaton was saying something else, Tim Anderson was saying something else. And it just made everything feel so weird that they weren't on the same page on something that shouldn't have been a big deal. But I think because no one was on the same page, it became a big deal.
Yeah.
And it's much like, once again, comparing it to later in the season, Michael Kopech. No one knew what was going on with Michael Kopech with his health. Could he pitch? Could he start? Is he reliever? Is he 1 inning or 5 innings? And when Katz came out and said, oh yeah, he could pitch 5 innings and it's fine. Okay, well, why didn't he start?
Yeah.
And, it's just, those are just some of the examples where, for a guy that you hired in La Russa to be the steady hand that has the experience, that has the knowledge, so on and so forth, it never really felt like he had the control or oversight on his team the way that you would expect out of a manager.
No, yeah. That was definitely because, I mean, in retrospect, everybody's still understandably, people have backed off Larissa a little to a certain extent. But at the beginning of the season, we were all skeptical, even though it was like we want to be hopeful, and we were, because we were doing well and things were coming together. But yeah, like that was definitely a terrifying, in a way, time for the rest of the season, because it's like you said, if they're not together on the same page, it's like, how is this going to work?
Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, it was I thought that was a really good pick of a game, because to me, there have been a lot of like performance related blunders or things of that nature, but that was a game where the Sox won, but this thing overshadowed for several games. It wasn't even just like 1 or 2 games and done. It was like a week later, it was still being talked about with the same level of hostility as if it happened the same day. And people were engaging on it.
Yeah, and I mean, as we kind of talked about, Yermín has done some things since then that are like,
yep.
I will say I love the guy. I still do, but not a good look, and I don't know what's going on there, but just from like from the optics position, like that does not, it doesn't look good. I hope he's okay and everything. But even since then, it's like, it still kind of hurts, because it's like, damn, like you mentioned, they weren't all aligned. So right. Yeah, even if he was getting yelled at the clubhouse, it sucked to see him kind of get thrown under the bus. And I do remember too some of the comments Larissa made about Lance Lynn. He said like, well, he's not the one with an office, and stuff like that was just like, oh my God. Like, well, what is this?
What's happening? Yeah. And I agree. Like, I don't think Yermín is going to end up back on any sort of major league roster anytime soon. Now, that being said, with the universal DH being on the table, who knows? That might change. But, there's a reason why someone with his bat potential is a 28-year-old that has been bouncing around in the minor leagues. Like, there's going to be some red flags there beyond we can't find a position for him to play, because there's a lot of guys that don't necessarily have a great knack for defensive ability, but their bat plays well enough that they find a spot for you, whether it's left field, first base, whatever. So I'm not shocked by it. I just think that if you are going to celebrate a player when he's doing well, you shouldn't then immediately shun them and put out all of these hit pieces from certain folks on, NBC Sports to say, oh yeah, Yermín's not that great of a guy actually, and here's like why it's okay that we're throwing him out the door. That was the part that to me just felt like unnecessary attempt at damage control that didn't need to be there.
Yeah. And I agree completely. Like, the turn in the media from the team was like so fast.
Yeah.
And I feel like that maybe is part of why we saw like 2 differing things in the clubhouse even too. It's like, yeah. And another thing is too, like, just the differing opinions between kind of old school people and then folks who are like, I think Colleen Sullivan wrote an article about like the unwritten rules, and it's very funny. If you guys ever read it, we can put it in the show notes.
Check it out.
Yeah, it's awesome. She wrote an article about it. I feel like it captures it really well, from how I feel like. But when you talk to other people, they're like, well, that's a thing. That's a baseball thing, and that has been. And there's so many differing opinions about it. But ultimately, for all of us, what was bad was that they were on different pages and it looked terrible.
Yeah. I mean, yes, I embrace advanced metrics, but I totally understand the traditionalist factor because I grew up watching baseball. So I've been around just as many of the old heads as the, newer geeky generation of baseball fans. So I get that there are unwritten rules, but at the same time, I've never seen a manager hang out his player publicly like that. And that's the part where it's just like, if you have an issue with it, that's fine. Deal with it inside. Like,
yeah, right. It's like, if you're going to be old school, why not also be old school in that mentality?
Exactly.
Which is keep it in the house,
Right.
It reminded me a lot of like when couples fight or something. It's like, we'll wait till we get home to talk about this, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was just so weird, and it was a really dark spot. Like you said, even though we won, it's like that was a dark time.
And I think it kind of had some lingering effects where it just, even up into the game that I covered, which was the last game that the Sox ended up playing, it still had that cloud of miscommunication that was kind of overshadowing everything else. And the players not really playing like a team that had just had a comeback victory in the playoffs, that had something to prove, that had a chip on their shoulder. They just kind of went out with a whimper, and that's not what you want to see from a team that's supposed to be this World Series competing club.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right, and I agree that I think all through the playoffs, obviously we had our one win against the Astros, but watching the other games was almost, especially 1 and 4, was so, like you said on the Soxivus podcast too. It's like they knew, they were just like, whatever, we're over it, which is sad. I turned it off because I was like, they've just given up. Or it seems like they've given up. I don't know that all of them have, but it just seemed like they did. And it's like, at that point in the season, if you're giving up here, I don't know. It's like, what is going on? But then all the players have been, they've been like speaking out positively about.
They've been saying the right things, but it's just like, you never should have this air of inevitability in a playoff baseball game. Like that goes against the whole point of playoff baseball, is that usually there are those moments of, hey, they're really grinding, they're trying to work it out, they're trying to compete, they're trying to pull it together. Can they pull through? Where with the Sox, it was just kind of like, no, not today. And
it's weird.
It was a very weird experience, because even when they were struggling, like, when the bullpen started collapsing for the Field of Dreams game, you could still tell that the White Sox were battling and competing. So when Tim Anderson hit the walk-off home run, that moment was just kind of like, there it is. Like, I knew they were going to put it together. But after that, it was just kind of like, are they going to show up? Are they going to put the ball in the air? Are they going to do anything more than just ground out and beat the ball into the ground continuously?
They lost the will to win.
Thank you, Hawk. So yeah, I mean, it is that TWTW.
But it is, though. Especially right now, I'm like, it's important.
Yeah. So I mean, with that in mind, it has been an interesting off season already, where the Sox decided to decline on keeping Cesar Hernandez around, which, everyone probably saw coming. They whoops. They are bringing back Craig Kimbrell. They accepted his option to bring him back, with the idea for many that means it will lead to a trade. Of course, that means that some team has to be convinced that he's worth the money to be that good as a closer, since he's clearly not a setup man, which is one question. And then more perplexingly to me, they declined to extend any sort of qualifying offer to one Carlos Rodón, who is now a free agent, and even if he signs with another team, the Sox don't get a draft pick. What are your thoughts around all of those lovely moves?
Well, Cesar Hernandez, I'm okay with. But I think, okay, so overall blanket statement with any of these folks, like you mentioned, I think finding a replacement for them is always a little nerve wracking. And then two, I do think with any kind of maybe a potential lockout on the horizon, when we're talking about any of that, it's also kind of like, So, yeah, I mean, with Hernandez, I was kind of like, okay, that's fine. Again, I always look at kind of hindsight, and I just remember bringing him in, and they were all aboard like Trevor Story, and then it was like, okay, well, if you compare their stats, they're similar, so this will be good. And he did okay, and then he just didn't.
Then he was bad. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. It was like, all right, this guy's fine, and then he sucked. So that's whatever. It sucks, but good luck to him. And then Craig Kimbrell. So I'm actually kind of biased on him because I like him. So in a way, I'm like, I would love for him to have another. People are going to hate me for saying this, but I would like for him to do well wherever he goes. But yeah, I mean, he wasn't working for us. I would love, on some fantasy level, if we like kept him and he turned it around. But like, you're right. That's whatever we've been trying with him's not working.
I don't think that's off the table, though.
I don't know. Something's not working, though. And I think the thing with all of these is, and this is it's like, is it something we're doing with him? Or
yes, it is.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's like, why can't we just not do that? And there we go.
I mean, yeah, I think I really personally think that Rick Hahn expected for Tony La Russa to be way more consistent with his bullpen usage than he was.
And I think you're right.
and I think that he got Tepera, Kimbrel, and Hendricks and was like, here, Tony, here are the best three relievers that anyone could get for next to nothing. Here you go. And some way, somehow, he still messed it up. Like, it's impressive how badly he botched it. And I think for Kimbrel, it was very obvious. Like, we've talked about it with setup guys turned closers. It doesn't always work out. A recent White Sox example that I always like to think of is Matt Thornton, who was this outstanding lights out setup guy. The Sox tried moving him over to closer, paid him all this money. He could not close to save his life because mentally he just didn't have the makeup to be a closer. And that's fine. But if you have somebody that clearly has a preference, Hendricks isn't that guy. Hendricks will go in the sixth inning if you tell him to. Like, he doesn't care. So if you know that, why not have Hendricks just be your ultimate high leverage guy where it could be the sixth, seventh, or eighth inning? If it's a close game, which it probably will be, you're the guy to come in, but Kimbrel's our guy for the ninth.
Yeah,
that to me would have been the best way of trying it out, as opposed to Kimbrel just kind of getting thrown in all these different situations and not having that routine.
Yeah, no, I agree. And it's weird. So it sucks to me. One, it sucks to see like the turn on him when clearly it's, like you mentioned, something's just not working.
Yeah.
And it seems like a waste. But people are mentally there already. They're like, good, because of the playoffs and everything else that happened. But yeah, no, it's not. That's the thing that worries me too about some of this stuff, is it's like we're expecting somebody to just come in and work right and not work with them necessarily. Right. So even talking about who might we get, there's just so many factors, which I think is a good transition to Carlos Rodón. Because I mean, to me, I was like, that sucks, and why? I do, as we talked about on Soxivus, I do worry that maybe there's something more going on there, injury and health-wise. But I also feel like even with that, we've gone through him with Tommy John. He was still doing decent even when he was injured.
Right.
And then, like you said yesterday, like I think you said this on our Soxivus podcast. I think it was you. Like, why even mess with giving him away if he's going to perform well, even like half the season?
Yeah.
He carried us for a large
Right.
part of the season. And
well,
that's
and it's very clear that the White Sox need starting pitching depth, because if Kopech is going to be one of your starters, he has yet to pitch a full season.
Yeah.
And he has yet to pitch. I don't even know if he's pitched more than 100 innings. Like, you're looking at somebody that is going from about 50 to 60 innings last year to now you're expecting them to pitch every fifth or sixth day. You have Ronaldo Lopez, who has performed well down the stretch, that basically seems to have pitched his way onto the team in some way, shape, or form.
Yay.
You have Keuchel, who isn't any good. And if he continues to crater out at the rate that he's going, you're going to have to figure out something to do with him that isn't starting every fifth day. And that's making the assumption that Lance Lynn is 100% healthy and that Cease is going to be the Cease that you've wanted Cease to be since the beginning of time. Like, there are so many question marks. I don't understand, even with injury, how there isn't a fit for Carlos Rodón on the team if he says yes to an $18 million contract for 1 year, which I don't even think he would say yes to, because he said all along that he wants the security of a longer term contract.
Yeah. And I don't know either. That's why we're here. And we're on the same page. It's interesting too, seeing people who feel the different way. They feel like he's toast. He is hurt, and he's gonna be garbage. But I also feel like if you can recover like he did from Tommy John surgery, like, I have faith that there's something mentally in him, and hopefully physically too. You know, maybe he is dealing, and he is maybe injury prone. Although I don't even know it's that. It's like he was relied on so much for so long, and he was amazing. He performed pretty consistently. That it's like, I'm not even really concerned like about that too much. Obviously, yes, but like you said, I think the problem is the depth, because we did have to rely on him so much.
Mm-hmm.
And another thing with it I worry about is people are looking at this like a 1-to-1, like we're going to get a 1-to-1 trade, and it's like, that's not how it works. We don't. Yeah, exactly. It's like, we don't even need a 1-to-1. We need somebody else. And like you kind of mentioned, we're carrying some dead weight that should be utilized, but we can't. So no, it's frustrating, because it's like, just who are we going to get? I mean, that's always the question.
Yeah. Well, and what are you going to get him for? Because you're talking about an organization that has a history of not liking risk when it comes to their pitchers. Like, they'll sign position players to longer term contracts, but pitchers, you're looking at maybe a 3-year max with bunches of options thrown in on the back end to try to make it as a sweetener. And the contracts are almost always front loaded, which means you're looking at guys that are going to be older pitchers that are either reclamation projects or close to it coming back. And, you know, I think it was yesterday, the Dodgers signed Andrew Heaney, who, if anybody watched him pitch last year, he was terrible.
I know.
He signed a 1-year deal for $9 million. And the Dodgers are smart. They're approaching it the same way that the Blue Jays approached Robbie Ray the previous season, where Robbie Ray looked awful, but the Blue Jays were like, we see something with him. We can work with him. We'll figure it out. They signed him to a short-term contract, and that worked out tremendously for them. And I know the Dodgers are banking on the same thing. But if you're looking at reclamation projects getting $10 million over a season, there's no way you're going to come close to getting somebody with Rodon's potential for anywhere near 18 million.
Yeah,
Like
exactly.
I just think the Sox completely misplayed the market.
Yeah, completely, which is very confusing. Like, that's the thing. It's like there's no maniacal plan, evil genius plan for this, and
No.
that's the thing I think a lot of people aren't looking at. We're always like, oh, this person's hurt or this person didn't do very well, when really there's a lot of other factors. We're a lot of fans, not all of them, but a lot of fans are big on like kind of almost like throwaway culture in a way. It's like, this guy didn't perform well. It's like, these are humans. There's a lot of factors and so many things that make a difference. I mean, the things we've talked about with Craig Kimbrell is like, those probably are pretty fixable, but do they want to fix it? I don't know. So yeah, I think I'm trying to remember, what was it? I think it was with this whole theme with this started for me as a newer White Sox fan. I think when we got rid of Ricky Renteria, and I remember people were like, "Yay!" and I was like, "Okay, but who's going to be the manager?
Who's going to be the new manager?" Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's like, that's great. I'm new here, but he seemed like he was okay. So who's available? You know, and then when the list of people came up, it was like, not a great list of people, but okay. And you know, it ended up working out all right, but kind of. So
But
yeah.
Once again, the Sox didn't go any further this year than they went last year.
No. And
the record was about the same.
Yeah, and I would say, I mean, we had more talent. We
This
didn't
year,
know.
absolutely.
This
Yeah.
year. Yeah.
Yeah.
Some of that maybe we didn't know to expect, but we did. We did have that this year. And yeah, you're right.
So I mean, it's just I do think you're right. There is this obsession with, you know, the new shiny thing without necessarily an appreciation of, okay, but you actually do have something here. What are you going to do? Because you can't replace it with a single player. So what 2 or 3 players are you going to get to help fill that gap?
Yeah.
And the Sox have never been good at approaching it that way.
Yeah.
It's a fun time.
I can tell. I've learned this pretty quickly in my short time as a fan. I'm ready for a lifetime of pain.
There you go. And that's why you're with us. And that's why you're with us, listener, as you listen to us on the Killer Bees podcast. We are going to take a quick break, and then we will come back to talk more about the hot stove. And we're back with Jazz Hands Keelin Billue. And yeah, with that in mind, are there any wish list items for you, or just even areas of focus that you would like to see the White Sox kind of tackle heading into this upcoming year? Assuming there's no strike, like, you know, all of this with the caveat that there may not be a 2022 season. But yeah.
Yeah, and we have plans if there's not a 2022 season. Tommy and I are going to create a telenovela, although it won't be on TV. So what's a radio soap opera?
Whatever the web video version is of a telenovela, that's what it's going to be.
Yeah, YouTube series of the White Sox.
It'll be a reading. There we go.
So a dramatic reading.
Yep.
Okay. Anyway, stay tuned, everybody. So yeah, I mean, obviously, second base is a problem. And
big hole there.
Yeah, big hole there. And I feel like we've been talking about this for a long time now, haven't we? And we put a Band-Aid there, but it's like, what are we gonna do? Are we just gonna? Honestly, I'm fine with just like sticking people in there at this point, but try something for the love of God.
But who do you stick? They don't even have other guys.
I know.
I mean, unless it's like Lurie Garcia and, you know, bring back Yelmer or something.
No.
I don't know what you do.
No, but I mean, even people on the team, I'm like, I don't even care at this point. Just try something, because it's just been painful. Like, how long have we been talking about this?
For a while. I mean,
Yeah,
even
all
with
season.
Madrigal being drafted, it was just kind of like, all right, this is fine, but if he doesn't become that level of player that the Sox needed him to be, what's next? And they're still waiting on what's next.
Yeah, yeah. So at this point, it's like just take care of that.
Yeah.
So because that's huge. We've been talking about it for way too long. Nothing's working. So I mean, there's always a risk with who you pick up, but figure out something.
Mhm.
As far as who, I don't know. What do you think?
I am of the opinion I would like to see Simeon come back to the White Sox. I know it's not going to
Bring it up.
happen.
Yeah, it hurts.
But to me, most of the money needs to be spent on some sort of a position player, whether that's right field or second base, or even if you got creative and brought in somebody like a Chris Bryant that can play multiple positions, or
Like
hell,
literally on steroids.
yeah, I mean, you need somebody that can kind of come in and play those roles for the White Sox. Somebody that I floated around as half joking, half not, as a reclamation project was Ian Desmond, who would probably cost next to nothing, hasn't played in 2 years because of COVID, and but plays multiple positions, is known for having a lot of pop in his bat. If the Sox can't spend money for whatever reason, there are guys like that are around that you can kind of plug in as position players. But their second area of need for me is starting pitching, just because you don't have anyone in the minors. Like, there are no pitching prospects in the minors that are close.
Yeah.
So you're looking at needs pretty much 1 through 5 as starters, and at least a couple of guys that can come out of the bullpen to help fill in some of those gaps. You can't count on Keuchel. You can't count on Kopech being available for the entire season and pitching into the playoffs, because we saw that happen with Rodón and really most of the guys. So I just think that those are the two areas of focus. And I would say it's probably the time to start trading away some of the lovely fringe prospects that we have. And yes, that might even mean a guy like Sheets, who I love, or Berger, or some of these other guys, but they just have too many samey type guys that are on the roster that are either going to be impact bats with a limited upside, or they're going to be bench or roll guys. And, that's how you kind of trade those guys away, get some bullpen help, get some depth, things like that, I think are the areas that I would look at.
Yeah. I will say too, towards the end of the season, especially, and again, this could go back to like it looked like they were asleep out there at times. The hitting was also just off.
Bad.
Yeah.
Well, I mean,
Yeah.
everyone was calling for Menachino to be fired, and I understand why. My only pause around it is the Sox in 2020 were fourth in Major League Baseball with home runs. Like,
Yeah.
they were absolutely killing the ball. They were getting the ball in the air. They were hitting home runs. They were doing everything well. This year has been such a weird fluke year. And then considering the health and lack of
Yeah.
conditioning that you've talked about extensively, and the injuries, it's like, how much of it was that, or how much of it is hitting philosophy? And that, I think we'll find that out this year.
Yeah. And you're right. Folks were out with injuries. I mean, Eloy and Luis were both out for a long time. And that's huge. So yeah. But then they were even at the playoffs, they were kind of off, which again, I mean, I feel like I think there was just something else there. It wasn't necessarily that they can't do it. It's just something was missing in general. And I will say too, a lot of people, and I thought this, like we saw problems all season, and I'm going to be honest, like the whole season I was like, we're probably not going to make it past round 1. Obviously, like
No.
I hope we do, but
We talked about this. I was like, this team is not making it past the first round. Like,
no.
you could tell.
Yeah, you could tell. But I don't think it's that they can't. I think they can. There's just a few things missing. There were so many things off. I don't know what that is. I think everything's there. It's just things weren't working together. Yeah. I mean, the Braves did it. I think we could have done it too.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't have a lot of the things they have, but I still feel like we could have done it. We had it there. It's just things broke.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, on that note, we will conclude episode 12. It is good to see you again.
You too. My heart will go on.
And let's not wait, 6 months before our next podcast.
I don't think that's going to happen because it's time to bring back Tommy Stradamus and all of your predictions that end up being kind of spooky right sometimes. So.
I've been around it long enough. You get a sense.
I love it. I'm always learning so much from you. It's great.
Likewise. And on that, what? I do. Fine. Well, we will be back very soon as the hot stove hopefully is actually hot next time we talk, and we'll go from there.
All right. Bye, everybody.
Bye, everyone.